Hi, so I'm gonna try this IGTV thing, and I want to talk about racism. Basically, what I want to say is that it shouldn't be something that is considered abnormal. It shouldn't be something that is considered morally wrong. It should be seen rather as a step of evolution. Here's my, what's the word, argumentation. So, let's take squirrels, for example. Squirrels don't, flee and are so nervous like that just because they're freaks. They are basically afraid that others will take their lives. It's a natural instinct that they have to fear whatever is not them. Of course, they can even fight amongst themselves, which is true of human as well, of course. But it's just a natural tendency to be less afraid of what is less different. And whatever's more different becomes more fearful. So it's easier to understand it between species. Like if you're talking about, humans being afraid of wolves or whatever, and wolves being afraid of human. But I'm going to take now a more concrete example of the racism we see on Earth, mostly the Black Lives Matter movement in the USA, of which I'm totally with. Sorry, I'm French Canadian. Sometimes I misspoke my English. Misspeak again. Sorry. So let's imagine for a second somebody like a black driver. I don't really like black and white. I think it's too easy because when we were talking about genetic population, it should be much more precise. But when we're talking about the instinct of fear, it's often as simple as darkness of skin, really superficial judgment. So let's take this black person that is being arrested by a cop. Let's take a black man arrested by a cop in the USA. Okay? And imagine for a second that this cop is black. Now, will the black person being arrested be less fearful of the potential outcomes of this encounter? Of course. And the reason is not because they are racist, although it looks like a racist judgment that they're less afraid of a black officer than a white officer. But the thing is that they know that it's kind of an instinct again, that the black officer will less likely think of them as pure criminals just because they're black. So from the get-go, there's less negative prejudice towards them, right? So that's kind of how the mind works. Racism is something that everybody has at a certain level, and it can basically be, in more scientific terms, be called the fear of the others. It's sexism as well. It's let's call it speciesism, when you're afraid of another species. It's whatever's different, like you're afraid of whatever could hurt you that doesn't have the same type of mentality as yours. Gangsters can be less afraid of another gangster than of businessman in a suit, just because they don't know the businessman's world. They don't know how he thinks, what type of whatever weapons or backup he can have. It's the natural tendency that we humans have. And my point is that I think we should less blame the racist and more help them heal and evolve towards being open to the others. So, like for example, I had a weird debate with a Mexican guy this week. He was calling the work of what's her name? Of course, she's really known. I'm forgetting her name right now. Black is King. She did this week. Beyoncé. Oui, ok, on va jouer à la balle. Sorry, my kid just spoke to me. So I'll quickly finish on this. For him, yes. Ça sera pas long, mon cœur. For him, Black is King was a racist statement because Black is King basically meant that white wasn't. Well, I was arguing with him first and foremost. I can call myself king and I can call my wife queen, and there's many kings and queens. That's the history of kings and queens. There's not only one. So naming yourself as king is just self-esteem, But his logic was that the fact that she was framing it as such meant that implicitly she was saying that white weren't. I don't think that's what she was saying. But it's interesting that there's this very specific linear type of thinking here, because what he's basically implying is that there's only one way of speaking a language, is words, concepts, you know? Like, for him, like, for example, just imagine a lot of rappers, black rappers from New York or whatever, and how they can use words to say that they're great. It's also part of a culture, a dissing culture, like I diss the other and things like that, and I put myself as superior. It's kind of a poetry. So just looking at it from a very superficial, logical point of view already fails understanding what the others is saying. And that's kind of what I mean by, at the end of the day, it's the superficial racism that we all live through fear of the others, sexism, speciesism, whatever fear we have of the natural world actually, is often just a misconception of the others. Wolves, I mentioned, is a great example. Very few humans were killed by wolves, and many wolves were killed by humans. But we have these myths, you know, it's the stories we tell each others, and in a bit the same way we tell these stories that, you know, I don't know, like the black is necessarily more criminal, or, and there's, you know, one of the most basic fear I've had a lot of, you know, I have a lot of black friends, but even them could frighten me sometimes when it's really dark. Like, you know, like I couldn't see them, and then they would open their eye or turn their eyes toward me and smile, and I would just see the eyes and the teeth. It can be very frightful from a very purely nightmare perspective. So if you're not used to that, like if you're black and you're living among black and you're used to not having lights at, you know, in the middle of Africa or whatever, you're not afraid of that because you've seen that all your life. If you haven't, you might jump out. But at the very least, you're intelligent enough to know that it's just another human being right there. And if he's not attacking you, then there's no reason to fear him more than the primal instinct you have. But if you focus on your primal instinct as if it's the ultimate truth, then you might say, whenever I meet a black person at night, they scare the shit out of me. They're always responsible for that fear. And you're not realizing it's your own unaccustomance. I want to say you're not used to that. That's where the fear comes from. So the fear is not necessarily our enemy. It can help us a lot in really dangerous situations, but when it's triggered just because we don't know the thing, then we have to be more mature than the fear and use the data, the information the fear is giving us, with our mind, and learn to overcome that and see through empathy the other. And I think that's kind of more the path towards racism-free world than just, you know, pounding on them, being a, I want to say, social justice warrior, you know, like the aggressivity that you're racist, you're racist, you're racist. That's not helping. You know, you're again afraid of the difference because you're not taking the time to understand where their fear comes from, and you're talking from your fear. You're saying, I'm afraid of you because you're racist. I don't know what the fuck you'll do. You know, you might kill an innocent friend of mine. So, of course, they're all legitimate fear in a way, because they can come from experience or ignorance. And ignorance is legitimate. I'm not saying it's the truth. It's not the scientific truth. But it's legitimate in the sense that one needs to learn. It's not in it. You know, you're not born with that. So I think, you know, to not tolerate the intolerance can be intolerant, and it can be the problem more than the solution. So one has to more be tolerant of the intolerance, so that there's a bridge, so that there's something that can evolve from that. And when you see it that way, it's much more easy to heal and help. Of course, that doesn't mean that you won't kill. Like both my grandfathers did World War II, killed a lot of Nazis, whatever. And I'm proud of that. I would do the same. But it doesn't mean that you cannot forgive the Germans. right? It doesn't mean that you cannot understand where these people came from and how it built to that. And not trying to understand it is really dangerous, because that's when you start really recreating the pattern that you're actually trying to destroy. I think the USA did that a lot after World War II. You know, they became obsessed with demolishing anything that was communism while they were working with the communism to defeat the Nazis. So anyway, I'm not gonna get into that other parenthesis, because I know myself, I can open constantly a parenthesis and just talk and on and on. But I'll just stop here, and hopefully you get the meaning that I'm trying to say, that attacking the attacker isn't always the answer, but sometimes is. I'm not saying war and soldiers are wrong by definition. Sometimes you have to strike because they're just being crazy. You know, like what they were doing, the Nazis was crazy. But most of the time, it's just a simple reflex. And, you know, I don't remember the name of the comic who said that, the stand-up, but he was talking about his father being now open to gays, and then had, you know, wasn't sure about trans people, and then people said, "You're transphobic," and he's like, give him a break. You know, he's 75 years old. He just learned to stop being homophobic. He's growing. So one day, or maybe next life, he'll be able to get about the trans rights. But right now, he's going towards there. Don't attack him for evolving, you know? So anyway, have a good day.